set up? Have you been set up? Mm-hmm. Yes? Ever been set up? Have you ever been set up to fail? Have you ever had anyone ask you a question that implied an answer that you knew would catch you or trap you or commit you to something? Yeah. So the Pharisees were always trying to set Jesus up. They were always trying to catch him, to commit him, to make him say something that would put him on either the right side, according to them, or the wrong side, according to the powers, the authorities, who could hurt him and kill him. And so they come to him and say, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? Who or what do you think they're referring to? Does anyone know? I'll give you a hint. It's a specific person and a specific situation. What? No. Nope. Nothing we talked about in Bible study has to do with this. You know who it was?
He set you up.
How to set you up? It was Herod. Herod, who was the tetrarch, the appointed Roman leader who took the title of king, King Herod of the Jewish people. He had taken who as his wife? The wife of his brother, right? Right? This was a big scandal. It was a big scandal in first century Palestine. The Romans were like, whatever, we don't care, do what you want. The Jews were like, this one who claims the kingship, this one who claims the divine ordination from God, this Roman usurper and his lack of morals, his lack of respect for our law. But they couldn't say that out loud, right? They weren't allowed to say that out loud. If they said that out loud, if they stood up and said, Herod, he is immoral, he is wrong. If they stood up and said that, what would happen to them? So, what were the Pharisees trying to get Jesus to say? It's very big. Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? What they really wanted to know is, so, what's your position on the whole Herod situation? What do you think about him? Say, publicly, in front of all these people, in front of this great crowd, what is your position on, not marriage, Herod? What is your position on Herod? That's what they wanted to do. They were setting him up. If you come to our Bible study on Wednesday, where usually we talk about Romans, but thank you, not this week, but usually we talk about the letter to the Romans. You know about being set up, right? Those of you who have attended, those of you who know the book, who is setting up in that book, Phyllis?
Jews.
No, who is setting them up? Who is setting them up? The writer of the letter. Paul, that's right. Paul is the one doing the setting up, and who is he setting up? The Jewish Christians. The Jewish Christians who in this church in Rome are belittling, bullying, pushing out the Gentile Christians. The people who were first Jewish and then Christians are belittling, bullying, discriminating against, pushing out, saying, you're wrong, you need to be more like us, to the Gentile Christians. The people who were first Gentile, Greco-Roman, and then Christians. And Paul sets them up by doing what? He sets them up by laying out their whole argument against the Gentiles. He starts it, it's this famous passage. It says, for the wrath of God is revealed against all who by their unbelief corrupt, pollute the gospel. And he lays out this long list of all the horrible things that such people do. And then he flips it around. He flips it around on them, and he says to the Jewish Christians, therefore you have no excuse, whoever you are, when you what? What is the terrible sin in Romans? When you judge others. When you judge others, for in doing so, you condemn yourselves. Who were the Pharisees judging? Let's see if you're paying attention. Who were the Pharisees, and a lot of people in first century Palestine, who were they judging? Herod. They were judging Herod for what he had done. All right? Now Herod, he was a corrupt dude, all right? He was installed by the Romans. He was in it for the money. This is almost certainly true. He was someone who any of us, all of us, Bible scholars, regular people in the pews, liberals, conservatives, everybody can agree that Herod was deserving of judgment, all right? Herod was not a good guy. He was not a good leader. Herod was someone who you could look at and say, yep, you're out. Yep, God hates you. Yep, everybody could agree on that. Nobody wanted to say it because you would get in trouble. But everybody could agree on that. But Jesus says to them, when they say to him, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? He says to them, well, what did Moses do? And they said, well, Moses says this. Moses says that we're allowed to write a certificate of divorce and dismiss her. And Jesus says to them, well, actually you're not. Actually, you're not. This is a part of a long teaching of Jesus. And you can see that it's broken into two parts. Because when Jesus speaks to the Pharisees, he says one thing. He says that you shall not do this. You shall not divorce. And then it says the disciples asked him about it again later. Say more about what we're saying. And he says that if you do, you commit adultery. You violate one of the commandments, right? This is a part of a long teaching of Jesus where he talks about what it takes to violate the commandments. He says in another place, you have heard it said that you shall not murder. Somewhere I read, or somewhere someone has said, as it says in Hebrews, where does it say that? You shall not murder. In the Ten Commandments, right? Jesus says, but I say to you, if you hate anyone, you have violated that commandment. Jesus says, somewhere it says, you have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you, what? Jimmy Carter said it. If you have lust in your heart toward another person, you have violated the commandment. Jesus was talking to the same people that Paul was talking to. And I'm not talking about their Jewish identity. I'm talking about their judgmental nature. He was talking to the same people that Paul was talking to. The same people that are all over the world in every human being today. The same people that we, terrible people that we are, can be sometimes. It's the people who want to look at other people, other situations, and say, obviously that is wrong. Obviously that is corrupt. Obviously that is what God does not want. We can be those people sometimes. We try not to be, but we can be. But we hear that all the time. We see that all the time. That human compulsion to look at other people and say, you, oh man, look at the stuff you're doing. Well, what about the stuff I'm doing? Well, there's reasons for that and this and that. It's such human nature to do that. And Jesus is speaking directly to those people right here, just as Paul is speaking directly to them in the letter to the Romans. Just as Jesus is most especially speaking to them when he says the wisdom teaching, you must remove first the law from your own eye, so that you can see clearly to take what? The speck, the splinter, the tiny little fraction of what's in your eye out of your neighbor's eye. Is the point that you, the hearer of this, have logs in your eye and other people only have splinters? Is the point that you, the hearers, are in violation of the commandments and other people are not? Is the point that you, the hearers, are terrible and people who do things that you think are terrible are not terrible? No. That's not the point. The point is that when you judge others for doing things that you think are terrible, you're overlooking the terrible things that you yourself are doing. What did it mean in the first century to divorce? It says it in another place. It says it in the Gospel of Matthew. When it's telling the story of Joseph, now we can bring in Joseph to us. When it's telling the story of Joseph, it says that while they were engaged married, as we said over there, while they were engaged married, because it says he was her husband, while they were married but not yet living together, it was discovered that she was with child. And so it says he made a plan. It uses another word that means the same thing in this time, in this culture, as divorce. But what's the word it uses? Dismiss. To dismiss her. Dismiss her. And we know that, dismissed. You are dismissed. School is dismissed. Class is dismissed. It means get out. It means go. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And in the first century, in this culture, what did it mean for a husband to dismiss his wife? It meant her life was over. Metaphorically, at least, but literally, in many cases. It meant that she was utterly destroyed, utterly disgraced, that no one could take her in, that no one could accept her. And Jesus said to them, when you do this, you have sinned. Because what the law said was when you do this, there's no consequence to you. You've done the right thing. You've cast out the sinner from among you. You've gotten rid of the problem. You've dismissed what's wrong. And Jesus says to them, nope, you can't dismiss each other. You can't cast out each other. You can't do that. You can, but if you do, you yourself are damaged. You yourself are hurt. There is an accountability, a consequence to you. Now, I said all that stuff about the first century and the power dynamic because we know it's not that way today, at least not in our culture. In other cultures it may be, and we may look at that judgmentally, but in our culture, we know that relationships are not this way, that when they break and they end, it's not the end, even though it might feel like that sometimes. It's not the other end, or it doesn't have to be. But the teaching of Jesus is as clear today as it was then. Do not dismiss each other. Do not destroy each other. You may be in obedience to the law. You may be justified by all standards of society and legalities and whatever. But if you do that, you have violated the law of God. When you dismiss, when you destroy, when you judge, when you exclude, you have violated the law of God. Because what's the law of God about? It's not about what the law of Moses is about. It's not about behave or you'll be punished. It's not about live perfectly and the kingdom will be restored. That's what the Pharisees thought. That's what today's modern Pharisees still think. The law of God says, do what is just, love, and be merciful. Walk humbly, knowing that there are sticks logs in your own eye, and that your neighbors are carrying heavy burdens. When Jesus speaks to the Pharisees, he is speaking to those who want to deny, who want to exclude, who want to sit in judgment and say those people are wrong and they should be cast out, dismissed, and we are right. And so Jesus is speaking into our hearts and into the heart of our society to say, you yourself are not in line with God's law when you do this. When you dismiss, when you degrade, when you denigrate, when you destroy, you are over here. God is over here. May we continue to wrestle with this. May we continue to know that God is calling us to be reconciled with each other and with all people. May we continue to know that in our relationships, as in our community, as in our hearts, God is working for the day when none will be dismissed, when none will be excluded, when all will be one, united, joined together